This is Booking It to Financial Freedom, show number 19.
It just shows that there's certain patterns that lead to success and wealth. Yeah. The 10,000 hour rule that, it typically takes 10,000 hours to get really good at something. It's just doing what you need to do every day.
The point in the book where he was talking about Jerry Seinfeld, he was asked how he became so successful with stand-up, and he's like, every day I write jokes. That's what I do. I write jokes. So writers write, painters paint, musicians play their instrument. You're one thing, right? One thing a day, and it adds up to big, giant, awesome things.
Welcome to Booking It to Financial Freedom, where we explore literature from some of the most successful experts in their field to help you build a blueprint for personal growth and financial freedom. Join us as we examine a new book every month and break down key concepts to help you get out of the rat race and on track to start building a life better than you ever imagined.
Hey everyone, I'm your host, Amanda Schneider, realtor and investor, and I'm here with my co-host and teammate, Jamie Booth. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Amanda, how's it going?
Good. It feels like forever since we've recorded because I was on vacation and we've just had a lot of things going on. So I think it's been a couple weeks since we recorded something.
Yeah, I mean, the show comes out about every week, but, you know, sometimes we have to, work around our life schedules and vacations, family time, stuff like that. So we do a little pre-recording. So, it seems like forever.
Yeah.
And, for everybody watching on YouTube, I'm less hairy.
You are.
My beard fell off.
Did Jen ask you to do that again?
No, I was in the bathroom getting ready one day, and I was like, my beard is driving me nuts.
Yeah.
And I just had to hit the reset button.
Yeah.
So I'm a little sad after the fact, though, because I don't like my face without a beard.
I think you have a lovely face.
Well, thanks. But
Lindsay says the same thing. Like after a few weeks, he can't take it anymore and has to shave. So
yeah, mine was getting a little out of control, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of man grooming.
I'm sure it is. Welcome to being a woman and what it's like for us to upkeep everything. Okay, well, I'm excited to get into this episode. This is our third one about the one thing, and we're going to kind of summarize the rest of the book in this episode. There's so many good reoccurring themes that we'll talk about in this book that have just shown themselves in our previous books as well, which, as you and I were talking about, it just shows that there's certain patterns that lead to success and wealth.
Well, yeah, when you see the same information kind of, not really regurgitated, but, it pops up in different books, different, teachings, all this other stuff. It lends weight to the fact that it's true, right? That it holds the test of time as far as these recipes for success, either personally or, financially or whatever it is that your big goals that you have in life. But, kind of like what we talked about with Miracle Morning, where, in the Miracle Morning, they were talking about, if you start looking at all the most successful people in the world, patterns start to emerge. And same thing with these lessons that we're doing in the one thing, the patterns emerge. Like a lot of the most successful people in the world, they have their morning routines. So it all kind of starts to come together in a big picture.
It's kind of the whole point of what we wanted with this podcast is to help people make a blueprint to success. And so if you recognize these themes throughout these books, you will have a blueprint written for you at the end of the year when we're done with all the books we're reading. So, yeah. Yeah,
and it's good. It's like repetition is good too, right?
Exactly.
So, you start seeing the same thing over and over and over, and it starts to resonate. And I think that's the funny thing about rereading these books and, forcing ourselves to cover with the podcast and stuff is going back to back to back. It's just like, it's kind of more prevalent.
Yep.
I can't talk today. So I think it's really cool. It's awesome. And it's what gets me excited about these books.
Me too.
It's good stuff.
I love that. Well, we're going to do just a small little recap of some of the themes in the one thing. So because he touches on them again and each theme kind of builds upon itself. So in the previous section, he had talked about the lies. And there was 4 different lies that were kind of, told throughout our life. And the first one was a disciplined life, and that all you need is discipline and you can be successful. And what Gary and Jay say in this book is it's not about discipline. It's about identifying the most important thing that needs to be done so that, maybe it'll make everything else easier in your life. So if you don't feel like you're necessarily a super disciplined person, that's not that specific thing is not the key to success.
Our discipline is limited.
Yes.
You got to muster just enough discipline to formulate big habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think he was talking a lot about how it's easily exhausted. Like our willpower is easily exhausted.
Willpower is not on will call.
Yep, which is the second. The second lie. So again, after you've made so many decisions throughout the day or the week, eventually your body just it's just exhausted, and the more difficult decisions are harder to make. And that's why, if you're on a diet and at the end of the stressful day, you go home and eat a bar of chocolate. That's why, because your willpower is exhausted. So, and then the third one is that you can have a balanced life. And we talked about this a lot in the last episode. So if you haven't listened to that episode, please go back. But it's basically just, we're told to have that everything should be in balance, but it's just not possible. And that's okay, because you concentrate on what needs to be concentrated on. And then you kind of get back to the middle and, spend more time with your family or work on that project or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's unattainable and unrealistic. So, we have our opinions on it, but, go back, cover the material for yourself. And it's good stuff. Think. It's good. Get your wheels turning for sure. The more you think about it. So,
And then the fourth lie is that big is bad. And you will see throughout this book that Gary and Jay are huge proponents of going as big as possible. Push yourself, see what you're capable of. So.
Yep. Limiting beliefs. It's one of the biggest things out there that really hampers everyone's personal success.
Yep.
It's just telling yourself that you can't do something.
Exactly.
Which is, what we're covering today. We're going the opposite direction with the truths, right?
And last week we covered kind of the first two that he discusses, which is basically the whole theme of this book. What's the one thing I can do that by doing it, everything else is easier or unnecessary? So really identifying that focusing, or using that focusing question to identify what's the most important thing you need to do for the year, the month, the week, the day, etc. And then finding a way to implement the success habit. So how can you take that most important thing and really block out the rest of the world? He encourages 4 hours a day on whatever your most important thing is, that you literally, shut yourself out from the rest of the world, turn off all your notifications, and concentrate on that one thing. The next truth that he talks about is, he calls it the path to great answers. So there's a good visual in the book where he has these actually drawn out in quadrants, but he talks about there's 4 options for framing a great question. And so in quadrant 4, you can be small and specific. So you could say something like, what can I do to increase sales by 5% this year?
Right.
But
yeah, he talks about how a small goal like that, it can be kind of misconstrued, like it. I can't even talk today.
It's because we haven't recorded for a couple weeks.
I know. It's like I'm rusty. The example he uses in the book is that you could say, I want to increase my sales by 5%, but the market can just fluctuate a teeny little bit.
Right.
You could attain that goal inadvertently. So that's what's the fallacy in setting a small goal like that for, growing a business or your personal situation, is it can be easily achieved, and it's not, it doesn't have the big impact. It could be an outside factor that kind of pushes you easily towards that goal, and it's just not big enough.
Right, exactly. And it's not time specific either. So then the next quadrant is small and broad. So just what can I do to increase sales? So this is just, obviously too broad. It has, no numbers in it, no timeline, no nothing. And then quadrant 2 is big and broad. What can I do to double sales? So, that's double sales is obviously a lot more than 5%, increasing sales by 5%. But again, it's a big question, but no specifics. Is this doubling it in 20 years? Is it doubling it in 2 months?
The problem is it doesn't drive you forward, right? It doesn't give you, something to force you into action, because achieving any goal is about doing what it takes to achieve the goal, right? So when you just kind of have this big, broad goal, you don't really have a direction to go in, right? You don't have a specific direction to move forward to.
Right. Yep. So then he focuses on quadrant 1, which is your focusing question should be big and specific. What can I do to double sales in 6 months? So this question has all the elements of a great question, doubling sales, which is a huge achievement, time frame of 6 months, which is challenging, and it requires a big answer. So those are the kind of things, if you guys have ever heard of like SMART goals, specific, measurable, I don't remember what A stands for, but basically, you know, you want to make sure it's very specific, that you can measure it, that it's constrained with a time frame, et cetera. That's what you want your big questions to all contain, so that, like you said, it drives you to actually achieve your goal. And it should push you outside of your comfort zone. It shouldn't be something that's easily attainable. I think it's even Gary Keller that said before that he makes these big goals not because he achieves them exactly the way they're written every single time, but it pushes him so far beyond. If he even just accomplishes 75% of the goal, it's still way more.
Still progress.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Still
way
moving
more than
forward.
he would have ever done before. So.
Yeah. And then, you know, we're going to talk about next is about the finding a great answer. And on that note, set your big goals. But when we've talked about this in past episodes, is they can't just be so big that your mind automatically registers that as unrealistic, right?
Sure.
So it's got to be big, ambitious, but not so big that it's like unachievable.
Right. That deep down you're like, I know I can never do this. So
yeah, and then you'll quit on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although I would almost argue that in this book, Gary and Jay want you to almost push yourself to that degree, because he talks about 3 types of answers. So he said one answer can be doable. So something already within your reach or your skill set. They're stretching it, maybe something that, you know, after you watch a couple YouTube videos or read a couple books, you can easily do. And then the third one is possibility. So it exists what is beyond what is known and already being done. So, you know, probably higher than your skill level, and also maybe, you know, not a product or a service already offered out there, something that truly is going to make you do some research and think about, you know, how you get to that.
He talks about, you know, and from a business standpoint, either like a product or a service. And this is really valuable information. I know we've covered this before as well. You know, modeling yourself after something that's successful. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel or start something, I mean, obviously people are going to come up with ideas from nothing, but generally, you know, with the stretching it or the possibly exists of moving forward, right? So you basically use that modeling method as they say, oh, I want to do this, but you want to make it better. So you have it. You start off with a higher baseline as opposed to from scratch. You take the modeling method, start your own business, model it after whatever burger joint, whatever.
Right.
But then you try to take it to the next level.
Right.
So that's the power of books and all that other stuff, is like all these people have done years and years of research, and now you have all of that readily available for you. You don't have to go out and recreate the wheel.
Right. Yeah. His whole focus is just like you were saying, go do the research, go talk to the people that have done it, the books that have been written, etc. But push yourself to those limits, because if you want to achieve greatness, then you've got to do the work to get there.
Yeah, you got to go above and beyond what's being done.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to model a business after something else that already exists.
Yeah.
If you're just going to try to copycat it, you're not going to get anywhere. But, you know, you have to offer something bigger, better, more appealing, all that good stuff.
And I just want to point out in here that Gary kind of validates our whole podcast in here, because he has a short little blurb where he basically says, in his experience, books and published works offer the most in terms of documented research and role models for success. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with this podcast. And it's such an easy way. I mean, it can be virtually free. You can go to a library and check out all of these books and just get a world-class education. So. Okay, so another component of living an extraordinary life, he says, is living with purpose. So he gives a couple examples in the book, one of Ebenezer Scrooge, and then one of the begging bowl. And if you want to go back and kind of read some of those examples, he spends several pages talking about it. But like with the Ebenezer Scrooge one, in the beginning, his purpose was money, and he was completely alone and just kind of a terrible person and sad and a lonely life. And then once his purpose became helping others, it was a purpose much greater than himself. And that's where he found happiness and true fulfillment.
Yeah. It's a really clever way that they broke the story down there for the Ebenezer Scrooge.
And the whole thing with this section of the book is he's basically saying that, you know, everyone says ultimately that they want happiness. That's basically the thing they want out of life. But happiness doesn't come from just having money. It comes from fulfillment. And this is our first reoccurring theme that we've seen in several of the other books that we've read is you have to have that true fulfillment. And he takes it to the point of try to find that in the work that you're doing. So obviously we can find that with family and friends, etc. But it should also be in the thing that you're spending the most time doing, which is typically
kind
work.
of, basically you're saying is true happiness. Obviously we buy stuff with money. So having more money allows us to buy more things.
Absolutely.
Things bring us temporary happiness. So it doesn't matter how much money we have. If all we're doing is trying to buy new things to find short-term happiness, we'll never truly be happy. So living a life of purpose, by doing so, that gives us our happiness and our fulfillment on a daily basis. It's not about just getting more money or buying more things or whatever. It's about living every day in a life of purpose, because if you do that, then that's being true, finding true happiness.
Yeah.
Another thing I thought was funny is, or not funny, but interesting, and I've heard it several times before, but he asked, I don't know if he asked or if there was a study done where they asked people like, well, how much money do you need to have to be happy? And everybody starts off at, something close to $1 million, and it just goes up from there. But at the end of the day, no matter how much money you have, it's not going to bring you happy. It's going to bring you temporary happiness. It might enable you to do fun things, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a big purpose, your one thing, all that good stuff, it's all temporary. It's an illusion.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, Gary, that he said he asked that, I think, when he gives, speeches and stuff. And, that's what the answers he gets from the audience. And what he says is that financially wealthy people are those that have enough money coming in without having to work to finance their purpose. So he brings it back to the purpose of like, well, what is your purpose? If your purpose is, like in my case, potentially like mentoring others to help buy investment properties, et cetera. Like how much money do I need coming in so that I can dedicate some of my time and my resources to help people with that? Just things like that it's not a number. It's truly individualized by what your purpose is.
Absolutely. You could be very poor monetarily, but extremely happy and feeling very wealthy. So it's a state of mind, and it's being able to live your purpose.
Yeah. All right. And then the next theme is to live by priority. So he says, purpose without priority is powerless. So again, it's just the reoccurring theme of understanding what the most important thing for you to do, that year, that month, that week, that day, to get to your purpose.
Yeah. I really this part really resonates with me. I've been kind of living my life this way forever.
Yeah.
Maybe not so specifically, but in the military, a big thing is reverse planning. So this is kind of like a different angle at reverse planning, but for your goals. So I really like this part.
It's funny because he talks about how a lot of times in society we say, like, what are your priorities? We pluralize it. And he mentioned in the book that priority up until the 20th century, he said it used to be...
It was never plural.
Yeah, it was unpluralized. It just meant priority because there could only be one thing that was most important. And so it's been something that's just kind of lost its meaning throughout society. And then he goes through to, we talked about the marshmallow example, I think if it was last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, but how a lot of times we're just not patient.
Delayed gratification.
Yeah, we're just not patient. And so it's hard for us to live by priority because a lot of times that priority means setting our future self up for success, but we want that gratification now.
Yep.
So he gave the example of, I guess there was a study done that if you could have $100 now versus $200 in a year, what would you do? Most people are going to want that $100 right now because they probably need the money right now, et cetera. And they don't know, they can't wait a whole year. So again, just prioritizing and understanding that a lot of that means setting yourself up for success in the future.
Yeah. And one of the things it talks about in this specific example is the further away the goal is, even it could be astronomical. It could be like, I'll give you $1,000 today, or I'll give you $10,000 in 10 years.
Right.
Right. So the further away the goal is, the smaller it seems, even though it may be huge, but the further away it is, it just seems more either unattainable or insignificant. So people are far less likely to do it.
Yeah. He has a good, again, a graphic in the book of goal setting to the now is what he calls, which is basically the same as the backwards planning from the military. So I encourage our listeners to go in and look at that graphic. But yeah, it's truly starting with your someday goal and working all the way down from 5-year, 1-year, monthly, weekly, daily right now.
Yeah. And what I really like about this is this is how you attain your big goals, right? So if you set this, when say astronomically high or just huge goal, right? That's, it may be attainable in a short amount of time, but if it's really big and it's farther down the future, right? And you can break it down. This is how you, in your mind, if you reverse plan your big goal, right, it seems achievable. So you just break it down from your someday goal to your 5-year, 1-year, monthly, all the way down to your daily stuff. And it's your daily habits, your daily action that if you continue to, I don't know if we talk about this later in the show, but you start chaining those days together. And the longer the chain gets, the more powerful it becomes. And then it sets you on that path to achieve the giant goals in the future. But you have to start with the daily actions that you do on a very regular basis.
Yeah, that's such a good way to explain it, because I think a lot of us could look back, 5, 10, 15 years previously and look at where we are now and be like, gosh, I never thought I would be here. Like, I never thought I would own, X number of investment properties or make X amount of money every year. Like, if you would have thought about that 10 years ago, it doesn't seem like it ever would have been achievable, but it's the work that we did every single day to get us to this point.
It's the stuff that you do on a regular basis. It's the small things that add up in the long run. Reading a book here, doing this and that, just your one thing, right? One thing a day, and it adds up to big, giant, awesome things.
Yeah. So along that same theme, he talks about the power of visualization, which again is another reoccurring item from other books that we've read. But he says there was a study of students that they had them visualize, one section had to visualize the outcome of, studying for a test, and the others had to visualize the process that they would take to prepare for that test. Oh, sorry. So some would think about like, I'm going to get an A on this test. The others would visualize what's the process to get that A.
Get the A, yeah. And the people who visualized the process were far more successful.
Yeah, which I thought is amazing, because we talk a lot of, or have talked a lot about visualization, but it's never been broken down to this detail. Even in the Miracle Morning, and maybe we miss it a little bit, but breaking it down to this level is amazing, to think about the actual process that it takes to get there.
Yep. So. I love the saying, what you read today is what you become tomorrow. So this ties right in there. And, I think a lot of people are guilty of like, well, one day when I'm rich, or one day when I'm wealthy, well, this kind of ties into this specific study here. It's like, okay, one day when you're rich, but what do you got to do on a daily basis to get there, right? What is the process to become wealthy? So that's what you have to worry. There's another saying that that's trying to come to mind right now is like, something about results are achieved by lead measures or whatever. So
rather than lag.
So the lead measures, which are the small actionable items that you take every day to achieve the bigger goal in the end.
Well, I think a great example is anyone that's ever tried to lose weight. If you have 10, even 20 pounds or whatever it is, it can be very frustrating, because a healthy way to lose weight is typically 1 to 2 pounds a week. And if you've got a lot of weight to lose, it's really hard to stay on that track to try to lose that 1 to 2 pounds every week. But if you do it, and so many people have, in 6 months, you've lost all the weight that you wanted to. And it's a healthier way to do it,
Yeah, people want the results now and not have to work for it.
It's so hard, yeah.
And that holds true in so many aspects of life, doesn't it? So, fitness goals, financial goals, whatever goals, like people want it, they want it now. Like, no, that's the other thing is that it drives me nuts. And it's kind of a little off topic, but, as far as the fitness thing, people see people are, fit or whatever, and they get mad at them.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
jealousy.
A lot of people think that those people just woke up that way. Like, no, like that person is probably the way they are because they have grinded thousands and thousands of hours in the gym. They worked for it really hard, and that's how they got it. So don't hate on them because they've achieved something that's awesome.
It's so funny that you say that, and I don't know if Lindsay will listen to this episode, and we've had Lindsay, my husband Lindsay, on as a guest before, and so he won't mind that I share this. But a lot of times he'll say that to me, like, "Oh, you're lucky. You just have such great genetics. Like you can eat whatever you want." I'm like, "No, I was raised to eat very healthy, and I've eaten healthy my whole life." And for those of you that listened to the episode with Lindsay, like when he was in his 20s, early 30s, like he had a lot of drug and alcohol abuse. So he abused his body. And so our bodies are just very different of what we've done over the last 20 years of our life. So he'll say that to me and I'm like, that's just not true. I've worked at it really hard to be able to, have some pizza now and then and my body handle it. So anyway.
Kind of on that topic too. And from the book, there's an example he talks about in there about Stephen King.
Yes.
Right. About how he time blocks, and people are like, "Oh, he can afford to do that because he's Stephen King." And then he reverses the question. It's like, well, is he able to do that because he's Stephen King, or did he become that successful because of what he did?
Exactly.
Right. So the 4 hours or the whatever his time pattern was, he wrote in the morning. I think is what he blocked his time schedule. He always wrote in the morning. So by dedicating that time over a long period of time, he finally became, the author he is, as successful as he is today, right? But it took all of that dedication and time blocking, and actually taking action on a daily basis. And 10 years down the road, he's one of the best authors in the world, right? And
most successful.
Yep. Yeah. He didn't just become that overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Then kind of the next theme with the extraordinary results is he says, live for productivity. And so here he kind of, in my opinion, like simplifies things because there's a lot of information in this book, but honestly, it comes down to what he says here is that putting together extraordinary results simply comes down to getting the most out of what you do when what you do matters. So what you're doing should be significant and you make the most of your time doing it.
Yep.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, we all have the same amount of time in the day, and some people are more successful than others, and what you have to ask yourself why, and the answer is they utilize their time more wisely.
Yes.
Right? They don't work longer. Some of them probably do, but there's only 24 hours in a day, so no matter how hard you work, it's about utilizing your time correctly.
Yeah, and he just emphasizes they devote the max time to being productive on their one thing. So Stephen King on writing, that's how he spends, the most productive hours of his day is writing.
Yeah, and I think Stephen King was kind of basically on the same recommendation that the book offers. It was about 4 hours. Yeah. So he.
And in the morning.
It done first thing in the morning while his willpower was strong, right, and focus. So get up. I'm trying to remember King's schedule, but it was like the morning was for writing, afternoon was for like
emails and responding.
Yeah, letters and all that stuff, and then he had his evenings blocked off for family time or emergencies if there was like last minute editing or something like that he had to do. But generally, he time blocked his days off, just like we're gonna talk about right now.
Yeah. So in order to be successful, and we've talked about it throughout this book too, is the power of time blocking. You have to protect that one thing, that block of time that you dedicate to your one thing. You have to protect that
at all costs. At all costs.
Yeah. And if for whatever reason, especially, it happens to us all the time just because, we work for clients. And so we have to kind of be around, we have to accommodate their schedule. So if we have a client that, wants to see a house in the morning and that's our lead gen time, then the lead gen needs to go in the afternoon. So it's non-negotiable that your one thing gets rescheduled. You erase it in your schedule and put it somewhere else in the day.
Yeah. And he was talking about how you guard that time. So if it's not a true emergency, then always either, say no, ask to reschedule.
Yes.
Ask to reschedule with that client or the family member or whatever it is. Can we do this later? Or can I get to this to you by this deadline?
Yes.
Try to divert as much away from that time block as humanly possible, unless it's a true emergency. And then if you do have to bust your time block, you immediately reschedule it.
One thing I found interesting is he says that if say you block off 4 hours and you're not done with your one thing, then you continue until your one thing is done. Like that is your one thing. And if you've misjudged how long it's going to take, then you do it. If you're done sooner than what you blocked, that doesn't mean you just immediately are done and you can leave. You then ask another focusing question of what is my next priority? Because I've got this time blocked off. So what's the next thing I can work on?
Was it in the book that he talks about? There's two different types of work. Basically, people who work to a time, and then people who work to achieve a thing, right? And the example he uses is the dairy farmer. Dairy farmer he doesn't work till 5 o'clock, and then he leaves. A dairy farmer, he cannot, stop working until all of the cows are milked, and then that's when you can go home. Same thing for people who, again, he talks about people who work for in a result-driven industry, right? Sometimes you have to work until 10 o'clock at night to achieve whatever it is that you have to achieve that day. If it's a big project or a client or transaction or something you have to work on, sometimes you have to work till 10 o'clock, and I haven't been in the real estate world all that long, but some days
You've had your share of
I've had my fair share of working until 11 o'clock at night trying to get deadlines met. So it's just the way it is.
Yeah. And that goes back to what he was saying about you can't always live a balanced life. You have to, those nights that you're working on a long contract and maybe not able to have dinner with your family or go out with your wife if you were supposed to have date night. So you work on that one thing and get it done. And then the next day you adjust and you come back towards the middle, and maybe now you're able to have that date night with your wife, whatever it is. So just you're constantly in flux, and being okay with that and knowing that sometimes your focus has to be in one area and another area suffers, but you always come back.
Yeah, always try to come back to the middle.
Yeah,
as much as you can without sacrificing your one thing.
And that goes along with when he's talking about time blocking. He really emphasizes the importance of resting. That it's just as important as working, because if we're never taking enough time to rest, we're not going to have enough energy to do.
Well, what I really like about this, the point that they make in the book is that you prioritize your time. Like the number one thing you block off is your play time, your personal time, whatever it takes to help you reset and be able to focus on your one thing. So I like that. Heard in the past on this note of blocking your personal time off first. I don't think it was from this book. It was probably from one of the podcasts I was listening to a while ago. But the method that they used was for like vacation, right? So plan your vacation first and then work around it.
Yep.
That way you have something to look forward to. So the same thing is like, schedule your 3-day, hikes in the wilderness or whatever in advance, and then basically have that to look forward to in the future, so you can stay focused on your one thing now. And you have some, you work hard. You know that your 2-week vacation's coming up in June or whatever, and then it keeps you kind of motivated to continue to work hard.
And during that week of vacation or whatever, that is your one thing. Your one thing is to spend time with your family and rest and relax and get rejuvenated.
And then the second time block is the one thing. That's your one thing, and he recommends 4 hours a day for that.
Yeah, I still struggle with that, because I think when you think the one thing, you think, well, it's got to be one specific thing. But again, it's using that focusing question to narrow down, like using your big goal and then narrowing down what it is you need. Because although we need to lead gen, I'm not going to lead gen for 4 hours every day like that. That's too much. We have other things to do. So for me, it's kind of finding what is that 4-hour block composed of. So yeah. I
kind of look at it as so I take that 4 hour, my view on it is you take that 4 hour for us specifically, take the 4 hour time block, and maybe an hour or 2 hours of that is actual lead gen, but then maybe a half hour of that might be catching up on market stats, looking at the MLS, doing other things. But it's all hyper focused towards the business or whatever it is your one thing is. But it doesn't have to necessarily be repetitive, like the only thing you're doing is this and that, right? Well, but it's still focused towards your big goal in the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I guess in my mind, I was like, well, obviously when we're actively working with clients, like we can't spend 4 hours a day lead genning. But if our goal is, double our amount of sales in 6 months, then that includes lead genning for an hour. It includes an hour of whatever admin stuff.
Maybe an Instagram post,
clients.
sending some emails out.
Yeah. Or
communicating with your clients, right?
Yeah. Or even showing, because obviously I need to get my client under contract to make money. So that all makes sense.
Unless you're a cold caller. I couldn't. No. I don't know if I could do. I'm sure there's tons of super successful people out there that they just cold call for 4 hours a day.
For sure they do. Yeah, I think it's a different type of personality, though. I'm not quite sure. You and we're a little bit more introverted.
I want people to come to me because I'm awesome,
right?
Not because I'm badgering them.
Okay, so we already talked about how to say no to protect your time, which can be hard for us to say, but again, it doesn't have to be a flat out no. It can just be, can I reschedule? When can I get this to you at such and such date, etc. So, and then he said, so the biggest challenges you're going to have to overcome to really protect your time block for that one thing is, first of all, build a bunker. So something where, and this is tough if you're in an environment, like when I worked in an office, we were all in cubicles. Yeah. We didn't have doors. People would walk by all the time and just want to talk to you. So however you can do that, he gives an example of his administrative assistant who just had to book a conference room and just sit in there for a couple hours every day so people wouldn't bother her. And then store provisions, maybe some snacks or whatever you need so that you're not constantly getting up. Sweep for minds, just making sure all your notifications are turned off. And then enlisting support, letting people know this is what you're doing. You'll get back to them when you're finished, even putting a sign on your door.
Yeah, like I really like the point he makes with these basically 4 methods to help protect your time. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's not necessarily all intuitive, right? So
agreed.
Yeah, so I like to build a bunker, doing everything you can to protect the time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so then he talks about the 3 commitments that it's going to take in order to, be successful in following through with your one thing. And the first one is the path of mastery. Again, this is something we've talked about before, but the 10,000 hour rule that, it typically takes 10,000 hours to get really good at something. So understanding that that's typically years and years of work. But back to what you were saying before, it's just doing what you need to do every day. And you look back 10 years from now and you've got that 10,000 hours.
Yep. Writers write, painters paint, musicians play their instrument.
Yep.
I think this is the point in the book where he was talking about Jerry Seinfeld, maybe about how
writing a joke.
He wrote. He was asked how he became so successful with stand up, and he's like, I every day I write jokes. That's what I do. I write jokes. So going back to the actionable items that you have to take every day to become good at something or to achieve your goal, you got to do it on a regular basis.
And then he talks about you have to make sure that you're moving from entrepreneurial to purposeful. So a lot of us entrepreneurs, and I'm totally guilty of this, just have tons of ideas. A lot of times we'll start something and we won't finish it, blah, blah, blah. But being purposeful in your action, and that is a huge theme throughout this, is, knowing your one thing, and that's the thing that you work on, and not letting yourself get distracted from that. And then the last one is live the accountability cycle. So, and I love this one because this is how I haven't always lived my life like this, but over the last couple of years, I truly try to take accountability for everything that happens, whether it was directly my fault or not. And that's basically what it is, taking ownership of all of your outcomes, whether, again, it was directly a result of something you did, or it was a result of something an employee of yours did. Overall, is taking ownership.
Yeah, that's just good leadership all around. And it's one of the things that have been beaten into me over my military career is, a leader is, responsible for everything that your team does or fails to do. Yep. And it's the same on a personal level when it's, we're not talking about a military scenario or whatever, but just on your day-to-day life, right? Take accountability for yourself and all the things that happen around you and your family and your business and your, workplace, whatever it may be. Yeah.
One example comes to mind, and this particular client listens to our podcast, so I know she'll know that I'm talking about her. But and I think I called you right after this happened, but I had gotten clients under contract, and when they had countered, the agent had countered, we have a daily deadline. So if there's a deadline for something, there's an hour deadline with it. And normally it's 8:30. That's typically what our team puts. But this client or this agent had moved it to 5 p.m. And it just completely, we signed the counter and everything. I was aware of it, but it completely escaped my mind. And that day, the client's inspection inspection objection was due. So basically what they're requesting to be fixed on the house. In my mind, I was still thinking 8:30, and I didn't get it submitted until 6:30. And that was the hardest phone call I've ever had to make. But I mean, all you can do is take accountability. I told them that I would pay for all of the inspection items that they had requested, that it would come out of my own pocket. They ended up terminating on that particular house, but it was thousands of dollars that were going to come out of my own pocket. But it's like, you can't make excuses, especially when it truly is something you just have to take ownership for.
It's not a good feeling, but you got to do it.
Yeah. And honestly, I think, and this particular client is a friend of mine too. And we've become even better friends, but I would want somebody to be honest with me, because people make mistakes, and it's better to just own it. But
I mean, I found myself in a similar scenario not too long ago.
Well, I take responsibility.
Still makes me feel sick, but
yeah. But there's also a graphic here that in the book that kind of shows you the difference between accountability and not being accountable, which I think a lot of this is, pretty obvious. But basically, if you're an accountable person, you just get on with it. If something happens, you accept that it happened and you move on. And then you find a solution, you own it, you acknowledge reality, and then you, seek reality. What's happening? How can I make it better? Somebody that is not accountable is avoiding reality, fights reality, and is blaming, personal excuses, waits, and hopes. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves, is somebody who just makes excuses for things. So own up to your stuff, people.
Yeah. It's I think it's becoming, not to get political or anything, but it's becoming rarer and rarer,
unfortunately,
these days in society. Everything is projected or whatever. But it's nice when you're around people who do take accountability for themselves. Yeah. That's why I like working with you and the people that we work with. Yeah. It makes a huge difference. It just take accountability for yourself, people. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last little part of accountability too is he kind of transitions into finding an accountability partner. So whether that's, you and I are that for each other, or finding a coach, that kind of stuff can really help you. And that's not even just an accountability partner to tell you when you're wrong, but just to show up to the gym, to do, follow through with the goals you said you were going to do, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's a huge deal, having a gym partner, all that good stuff. Yeah. And we've talked about it before.
Another reoccurring theme.
Yeah. If your gym partner doesn't show up that day or tells you they're not going to be there, you're far more likely not to go to the gym that day yourself. Absolutely. There's going to be an excuse. So just like you said, not accountability as far as whether you're right or wrong, but accountability to make sure you follow through with your actions that you say you're going to.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are starting to get towards the end, and I don't want this to get too long, but he does talk about the 4 thieves of productivity. So the first one is inability to say no, which we've already kind of covered that one. The second one, though, the fear of chaos, this resonates with me because I am someone who, I always say I'm overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed. And basically he's saying that by focusing on the one thing, other things are going to be chaos potentially in your life, because if you're blocking off 4 hours of your day to do one specific thing every single day, then the laundry might not always get done when it should be done. And, just things are going to pile up, and you got to be okay with it.
Yeah. There's a couple of different ways to think about this. I was putting some time into thinking about the fear of chaos myself. So as far as kind of growing your personal wealth, you have to focus on that one thing, and then other things are going to be neglected a little bit. So the way I was kind of thinking about it is, okay, my yard is not getting to, I live in an HOA. I hate it, right? I get weeds in my rocks, and I don't have the time to spend hours and hours doing yard work and all this other stuff. So the way I think of it is you focus on your one thing, and then the ultimate goal is to make enough money that you can just hire a gardener. So
is exactly it.
So on the focusing question, what can I do now, to make everything else easier or not even important, right? That's kind of the way to look at it. Is I'm going to focus on what I got to do to grow my business, and then eventually I'm going to have enough expendable cash that I can just hire a gardener, and then that problem goes away,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's kind of the way I was thinking about it. You know,
No.
or a maid, or not a maid, but a cleaner,
Yeah.
or whatever.
I was on the exact same page, and it's funny because that kind of correlates into the book we're reading for June, which is Who Not How, and that's the exact philosophy. And a lot of times it's understanding that even if maybe that expense feels a little bit uncomfortable right now, it's actually money that's going towards your business, because now you personally aren't having to spend your weekends cleaning your house. Instead, you're out lead generating, you're showing houses, et cetera, et cetera. So I completely agree with you. All right, the next one is poor health habits. And again, we've talked about this probably ad nauseum, is how important your physical body and your mental body are as well, as you are becoming successful. So incorporating things like the Miracle Morning, which is also incorporating physical activity, but all of that needs to...
Making sure your time block, your personal time and gym time and all that good stuff.
Yeah, but all of that is important. You can't only concentrate on trying to be successful in life, because your health is going to suffer for it. And Gary gives some personal examples in the book of what happened to him when he did that.
Yeah.
So, and then the last one, which is also a tough one for a lot of people, is that your environment doesn't support your goals. And whether that means your physical work environment, like your space, makes it hard because, again, maybe you work in an environment with cubicles, or your people that you surround yourself with make it difficult. And we've talked about this goal. This
friends and
before.
family. Yeah. And I don't know if it's OCD or whatever, but like my environment, my physical environment has to be like perfect, or it just distracts me. So yeah, it's like if things are out of place, or if it's messy, if things are, cluttered or whatever, like that's just a no-go for me.
Yeah. But it's the same thing we've talked about this as far as surrounding, you're some of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So it's the same thing with that. If you're spending a lot of time with people who are not supportive of your goals and your path in life, then you need to kind of reevaluate who you're spending your time with to make your environment more conducive. So, okay, then kind of just a summary, the last chapter, and I love this. He says, your life is like this. You don't get a fully mature one. You get a small one and the opportunity to grow it if you want to.
If you want to.
Yep. So it's all about what you do with that life. If you, think small and stay small, then that's what you're going to be. But if you think big, then your life has a chance of growing big.
Yeah, kind of backtracking on this point, and wanted to talk about it earlier, but he was talking about being productive with your time. So, doing things with your life, whatever. As long as you're alive, you're doing something. Right? So it depends on how productive you are going to utilize that time. Just sitting on the couch breathing, you're still doing something. Right. Is that productive? Yep. Probably not.
Yeah. And then he kind of ends the book. If you need some help with your focusing question, he talks about kind of some of the more important components of your life that you should be asking this one thing focusing question on, your personal life, your health, spirituality, hobbies, your family life, your job, and your work team. And he actually goes through like asking specific questions on each of these. So again, if you need some help with that, reference the last chapter. But he also, I don't know if it's like this in the printed book, but I was reading the Kindle version, and he's got several times throughout links to their website.
Yeah.
And there are tons of free resources on there. I went and signed up for it. You do have to provide your email, so you start to get a little spam, but tons of free things and basically like journals and workbooks that you can work through to help you develop your focusing question. A lot of what our guest in our next episode, Casey, talks about. She talks about the 411 and the 531 or something like that. But basically, again, narrowing down your year, your month, your week, your daily one thing. So
yeah, I believe that he has a lot of the charts and stuff on there too.
He does, yeah.
That are in the book or whatever.
Yeah, I'm a very visual person, so I appreciate things like that, and I like to be able to write that stuff out. So I will link the website in our show notes, but I think that's it for the book. Do you have anything to add?
No, I just... Yeah, I had a blast covering this book. I loved reading it a couple more times, because the way I do it is I'll read the book, and then as we come up to each episode, I'll either re-listen to it or whatever. So it's just, even after 3 or 4 times of reading this book, it's amazing. Hoping that everybody who is out there and has kind of explored it with us through these last few episodes has enjoyed it as well.
Yep.
Of course, we're not done. We still have one more episode to talk about.
Do.
But
yeah, we already filmed that one, so I guess it feels like we're done.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have an awesome guest on for next time. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, Jamie, you want to take us out?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've enjoyed covering the one thing, we have one more episode to cover with our guest next week. But for all those people who are going to continue to follow us along, our next book in June is going to be Who, Not How by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And that book is going to be focused on basically utilizing a team. So for people who have a workplace or whatever, to utilize the team to help formulate and achieve huge goals. So I'm looking forward to covering that book. I haven't actually read it yet, but I'm going to start digging into it tomorrow. So Sweet. I'm really happy about that. And as always, if you think you got any value out of our show, please pass it on to anybody that might be able to find value out of it. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Also, if you'd like to find out more about our team, check us out at the.ateam or the.ateam.homes on both Facebook and Instagram. Mm-hmm. Thanks, everybody, for joining in on us.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.